Okay, welcome everyone to today's Google Webmaster Central Office Hours Hangout. My name is John Mueller. I am a Webmaster Trends Analyst here at Google in Switzerland. And part of what we do is we talk with webmasters and publishers, like the ones here in the Hangout and the ones that have submitted questions already, even if they're in the UK, which I don't know. That might be tricky now. But I guess there are neutral partners now to some extent. So with that said, maybe we can start off with live questions from any of the newer people here in the audience.
Well, could I put my hand up for that one,
Sure.
please?
Go for it.
OK, so mine's a duplicate content question. And we're running a WordPress multi-site. And my question is the content that we flow down from the main site down into the child sites going to be subject to sort of poor SEO ranking because of the duplicate content that exists? We're basically putting blog posts onto the main site, which flow down into the child sites, and each of those child sites is a subdomain for one of our own business clients, and we're providing blog content for them for their own blog link to. So it's kind of linked in from external sites as well as down through the multi-site route, and we're just nervous that we may be getting into dangerous territory with duplicate content.
I think it's good to watch out for that, because there are a few things that could be happening there. So I guess first of all, we don't have a kind of a duplicate content penalty. So
No.
It's not that the web spam team will look at that and say, oh, this content is on 2 blogs. We will penalize this blog, and it won't show up in rankings. So
Okay.
I think that's one good part there. One of the things to kind of watch out for, though, is you're essentially competing with yourself. If you have the same content on multiple sites, then each of those sites is going to kind of need to rank by itself. And what will happen is we'll pick whichever one happens to rank highest and maybe show that in search and kind of filter out the other ones. So with that, you're kind of like diluting the value of your content across these multiple sites. But one of the things you could be doing is, for example, taking a rel canonical and saying, this is my preferred version. I have it on these other sites as well, but actually this is the version that I want to have indexed. And that way you can kind of combine all of the value that this content creates and put that into one version that's actually shown in search.
Okay, so if I were to, within the child sites, for each post that exists within the child sites, if I were to create some additional keywords against each of those, although the actual content is the same, but if the keyword and the meta tags were different because they're relating to different businesses in different geographical areas, there'd be some additional keywords to put in. Would that help differentiate for search purposes or not?
Not really. So the keyword meta tag is one that we ignore completely anyway, so that kind of wouldn't make any difference anyway. I mean, what would happen is we would index all of these different versions, but we'd recognize that someone searching for the primary content, like that blog post, would essentially have duplication. We would see duplicate kind of content in the search results. And in a case like that, we filter out all but one, and we just show that version. So it's not so much that you need to differentiate it from a search point of view, but just that we try to recognize, well, the primary thing they're searching for here is actually the same on all of these sites. One of the things you could also do, or maybe say, is that actually the rest of my site is unique across these different sites. For example, if you have one blog targeting the US and one targeting the UK, then you could say, well, they're different users. And depending on which user is going to look at it, you want the user to go to the right site. So in a case like that, you could use something like hreflang between these sites to make it clear which version to show. Or you could just say, well, I don't mind if my others are kind of dupe eliminated from the search results because I just want the best fitting one to show. But it's something where you're kind of balancing diluting the value with concentrating it on one maybe more generic version. And finding the right balance there is something that really depends on your specific site.
Right. So our the businesses that we're creating these blogs for, they have their own independent websites, but the actual blog page on their website will link to their own respective child site that we're hosting on their behalf. So does that mean that if a user comes to their site, well, I think what I want to know is whether the blog on the child site would actually drive traffic back to their own personal site because of the link back to it, if you see what I mean. Do you, I'm being a bit...
That would go to the original source, or where would that link go?
The link would go to the link off our business owner's client site would go into a child site within the multi-site that we're hosting. So we're sort of hosting a child site on their behalf that's got all the content in it. But that content is actually duplicated because we're providing the same content to a number of clients.
Yeah, I don't see that actually providing a lot of value in terms of that link being valuable there, because you're kind of diluting the value of that content across all of these multiple sites. And with that, like anything that happens with those links is kind of diluted across those sites too. So I don't really see that kind of link driving any value to the site itself.
Right. Okay. Thank you.
John, can I ask a question? Kind of, it's quite relevant to that question. So I've had a new client come on board, and they have the .co.uk and .com versions. They're virtually identical, exactly the same. The .co.uk one is stronger, but it also ranks over the .com. The .com doesn't rank at all. Now, the client wants to redirect the .co.uk into the .com, despite the .com version not being the one selected by Google to rank, and generally the weaker site. What implications can there be? Because when I think about it, if we're redirecting .co.uk into .com, and .co.uk has majority of the link equity, has more of the power, then more is going to be lost redirecting to the .com than vice versa, but it's more of their business decision. So I just want to understand the implications of that, as well as Google choosing the .co.uk over the .com version. Did you get that?
That's complicated.
So
UK sites trying to become neutral.
Yeah, essentially they got the .co.uk and they thought, okay, well, I'll buy the .com version because it's available. We'll put both of them live, but they are exactly identical. They both have the same content. Yeah, they're exactly the same, and Google must recognize they're the same because it's not pairing them off against one another. It's just choosing one and sticking with that. But then we're trying to force Google to rank the other one by redirecting that. Now, we haven't done it yet, but it's basically, I suppose, to some extent, it's going backwards, but because they want the .com over the .co.uk, maybe to explore different markets in the future.
Yeah, I wouldn't worry about kind of any loss from the redirect there. I think there's like a minimal kind of almost theoretical loss when you're looking at kind of redirects like that. So I wouldn't worry about any kind of theoretical PageRank loss there. With regards to a generic .com versus a country code domain like a .co.uk, I think there's that geo-targeting aspect that might play a role there, especially if you're trying to target a bigger audience. Maybe going to a generic domain makes sense. If you're really trying to stay with the UK audience, maybe keeping the UK version makes sense. But that's kind of like a marketing or business decision more than an SEO decision. So I try almost to look at it from a business point of view rather than from a purely SEO point of view. I think both of those could work. I mean, the hard part from my side is more that anytime you do any kind of a site move, you will see some fluctuations because it takes some time to actually settle down again. So that's something to kind of keep in mind. You wouldn't want to be moving around all the time. But saying, well, I want to move from this domain to another domain for a good business reason, that's a good reason to say, well, we want to take this step.
And I suppose, as you were saying, we can anticipate some loss in rankings and maybe performance going through that, which I'd expect through a site migration. I thought this was just particularly unique because both versions are live and Google have made that decision to rank one over the other. Well, choose one version over the other. So,
yeah.
Okay, I will bear the .co.uk targeting the UK market in mind then, and I'll let. But I suppose if they want to do it, they want to do it, and we'll just let them do it and hope for the best.
Yeah, I mean it's one of those things where sometimes business goals are more important than the SEO side, where you just want maybe a clear .com, or you want to say, well, I want to focus on UK and France and Germany and do maybe subdirectories or subdomains for each of those. Those are legitimate reasons to do that. But it's something where anytime you do any kind of a site move, you kind of have to have a little bit of respect for that, because sometimes things do take a while to settle down again. And if you know that ahead of time, if you can prepare for that, if you pick a good time where you say you're not really dependent on search traffic during this time, or maybe you can switch to ads for a certain period of time, or you're doing a TV campaign anyway, then these are all good reasons to say, well, we'll do it then.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you for your time.
All right. Let me run through some of the questions that were submitted. Linking. How important is internal linking structure with regards to linking blog pages to relevant categories and to each other? Can this have a big effect on rankings? So for the largest part, I rarely see any issues with regards to internal linking on sites. So sometimes that does come up as a kind of a topic where people are worried about this. But in general, modern websites that are built on a CMS, they have a clear category, subcategory, kind of detailed page structure, and you don't really need to worry about the internal linking, because that just kind of works from the start. In the past, sometimes that was very different, where maybe some sites had a bad internal linking structure that you couldn't really reach everything. You couldn't really crawl to all pages. There are also some kinds of sites that are more like repositories where you have to search for the information. That's obviously problematic from our point of view, because we can't crawl through all of the content. But for the most part, we can deal with most kinds of normal internal linking structure. So it's not something where I'd say you need to do anything artificial to make things work. One aspect that does kind of come into play, though, is when it comes to kind of new and updated content. If that's something that you change on your site that's really deep within the site, so you take like multiple steps from the home page to actually reach that content, then that'll probably take longer for us to notice that you've added something there, that you've changed something there. So one trick that people do, which is not so much an SEO trick, I guess, but also kind of naturally just makes sense, is to bubble that up into maybe one of the higher categories where you say new and updated content, these and these and these pages. Which could even be on the home page, where you say, well, these and these are new products that we have on our site, new kind of types of content. If it's a blog, these are maybe new blog posts that are on a site, all of that. So kind of linking it from a higher level means that we'll probably find the link to that a little bit faster and crawl and update our index a little bit faster for that new and updated content.
John, can I say two things about this?
Sure.
So one of it would be that, in general, I noticed that e-commerce websites that use general CMSs like Magento, PrestaShop, and things like that, do sometimes have problems with internal link structures in the sense that, if you have an eyewear store and you have, let's say you have round sunglasses, but you have it as a filter in your sunglasses category, and you don't actually have a page for round sunglasses, a landing page that Google can crawl, then you're kind of missing out on that type of that audience that is looking for round sunglasses. And if it's an Ajax filter or something, or a no index filter or something like that, people will just, Google will just not find that page and not be able to rank it for results like that.
Yeah, that's one thing that sometimes you need to watch out for. But I see that really rarely, that we don't find content at all. So it's something that sometimes comes up in the forums where people will say, why doesn't Google index this page? I added this to my site like a week ago. Why isn't it showing up? And it's almost never the case that I look at that and say, oh, your internal linking is bad. That's really, really, I don't know, maybe I've seen like 2 or 3 cases in the last year where I'd say, well, the internal linking of the site is problematic. For the most part, it's really, if you have a modern CMS, normal setup, then somehow we'll be able to find those pages. And obviously, we can do better if you kind of move that higher up the chain. But for the most part, we can find it. And obviously, there are things you can do to improve that, where you can optimize it and make sure that it's easier crawlable or harder crawlable. But
yeah, I guess I was referring more to less to internal linking and more to actually having those landing pages that are optimized for what people are actually searching for. Like knowing your audience is searching for a specific category of product, and you have those products, but you don't have them in a category or landing page of some sort. You'll just lose those potential buyers that are searching for that. Another thing was actually regarding the question was internal linking structure with regards to linking blog pages to relevant categories and to each other. So I think the person who asked that wants to know if, since, for example, backlinks are fairly important in SEO, and you're not really getting backlinks to product pages or category pages all that often, but you might get it to a blog page. You write something interesting, people might link to that. So internally, you might link from that blog page that gets those signals to some of your categories or your products, just so you can drive some of those signals to those pages.
Yeah, that makes sense, just from a natural point of view, where you kind of provide context to some of the pages within your website. I think it's always useful to have multiple ways of kind of reaching your content, rather than always having to navigate the category tree. If they follow your blog and they can find information there, or your social media channels, I think that's always useful. Maybe not directly from an SEO point of view, where, like, especially social media, where most of those links are no-followed anyway, but you can bring your traffic there, and people can find their way around within your website to find related content. And all of that really helps us to build a better context of the individual pages you have.
Can I ask, though, in the case of very big websites, is internal linking more important? We have one of our clients has like 1 million pages indexed, about 150,000 articles as a publisher. So is it more important in that case to properly have internal linking around the articles and everything?
From my point of view, I don't see that much of a worry there. If it's like a normal structure, I think you'd be all set there. I don't think you need to, or for the most part, you don't need to really tweak and optimize that for SEO benefit. Obviously, there are things you can do for usability, which can play a role in the end, but it's not so much that we can't reach all of this content. Usually, finding the content is something we can do. It's sometimes more a problem of duplicate content, where we run into millions of category pages that are essentially just different filter variations, kind of like what you mentioned before. And that leads us off into kind of being stuck in this kind of infinite space within your website rather than actually focusing on the real content. But that's a whole different discussion, I guess.
OK, thanks.
All right, we've got an old version of our logo appearing in the knowledge graph. For brand results, we added schema markup to the correct version of the logo on our homepage and added it to Wikipedia about 6 weeks ago, but it's not updated. What else can we do? The feedback link is something that I know the team looks at. I guess an important part about the feedback link is that you actually give some feedback there and not just say, this is wrong, and you rant into the feedback form. And it looks like, I don't know, some crazy monkey was sitting at the keyboard and got drunk and hit all the keys at once. But rather that you provide some useful feedback there and say, hey, this is my company. This is the wrong logo. Here's the right logo. Here's proof. It's on my company website as well, that kind of thing. So this is something where the team does try to look at that feedback and take that into account. Sometimes it takes a while for that to be processed, but that is taken into account. So if you think maybe you need to submit it in a cleaner way, then you can always submit it a couple of times there. That's not something where you're kind of like penalized for submitting it multiple times or trying to spam the form. The team does understand that sometimes issues are urgent and that you might submit it a couple times or have other people submit it. If I was to submit a new disavow file now, is it too late for the penguin algorithm? No, it's never really too late in that sense. Essentially, we have to kind of recrawl those pages where those links are placed, and then we'll drop them from our link graph. But that's something you can always do. That's not something you need to do at a certain period of time, and then you're too late, and then you've missed that. So that's something you can always do.
It sounds like Barry trying to trick you into a penguin answer.
Yeah, I don't have a date.
I want to check who Mick really is.
I don't have a date, sorry. I know some people are really waiting for this, and it would be nice to just say, well, it's happening tomorrow, but I don't really have anything to announce there. Recovered from an unnatural links penalty 2 years ago and have done a lot of work to fix things, but no change. I know a lot has changed since then, but could there be like one of the algorithms hasn't updated and left the site in limbo? So the Penguin algorithm does look at web spam issues, which could include things like unnatural links. So that's possible that might be holding your site back a little bit. But on the other hand, we look at a lot of different things across the site, across the search rankings. So just because one algorithm isn't really happy with what you did doesn't mean that your site can't move forward in other ways. So that's something where I definitely continue working on that. I wouldn't focus like purely on the link side, but maybe look at other ways that you can drive traffic to your site as well. So that's, I don't know if that helps you there specifically, but that's like one thing that you could do there. Another thing to keep in mind, of course, is if you've just removed a lot of unnatural links and you haven't really worked to kind of improve your site overall, then you've essentially removed a lot of things that were maybe unnaturally supporting your site back then. And if you haven't added any new support for that, then of course those rankings won't be jumping up very quickly. So that's something where over time, working on your site to make sure that it's really the best it can possibly be, that definitely helps. If you have two affiliates competing, but Google only thinks one of them is an affiliate and the other one isn't, will it treat one less favorably than the other? Our competitor has 100,000 doorway pages and a worse site, but you favor his. Please help. So we generally don't try to recognize if a site is an affiliate or not and kind of like flag that in search and say, oh, this is an affiliate, we need to treat it differently. We do try to look at the site overall and think, where is this site relevant? Where should we show it in the search results? So I'm not 100% sure that kind of the basis for this question is really correct. I'll just assume for this that these are just two affiliate sites that are competing for the same space. And as always, especially with affiliate sites, it's important that you make sure that your site really provides a lot of additional value to users compared to the original source or compared to the other affiliates. Because if you just take the same affiliate content and you put it on a different website, then that doesn't necessarily mean that we'd want to show this in the search results, because what is different compared to everything else? And this is especially true in cases where people email me and send me extra information, because when I take a look at your site and I make up a case for the search engineers to kind of look at that, I really have to show them that actually this site is a site for this specific topic. And by not showing it as a first result, we're doing our users a big disfavor. And on the other hand, if I take this site and say, well, this is actually the same as the first 5 results on this search results page, we should be showing it in the first 5 as well, they'll probably come back to me and say, well, if we already have 5 results that are the same, why should we add a 6th result there? It's like there's no additional value being provided. So really making sure that what you have is significantly better than anything else in that area, that's something that's really important for me when I make a case with the search engineers. I'll ask briefly again. Our website has been ranking well for the last few years, but there's a website with very thin content, which is outranking us. Why does Google prefer that website to my website? That's really hard to say without actually having any details. So this is one of those things where I'd say, first of all, maybe go off to the Webmaster Help forums and get some input from some of your peers who can look at like how things are ranking there, how your website is, what they see on your website, what they see on the other websites, to really give you some advice, maybe some things that you could be doing on your website to help improve that situation. In general, for the most part, if this competitor is a kind of a reasonable, normal site, focusing too much on what they're doing isn't really going to help you. And instead, kind of take that time and invest that in your site, because that's something that you can keep for the long run and that you can build up on for the long run. So instead of worrying too much about what they're doing, kind of the sneaky stuff they're doing, they may be getting through with, really focus on what you could be doing to really take it a step further. If you had to pick the 3 biggest improvements one should do to an affiliate site to improve its search visibility and rankings, what would they be? Oh, wow, 3 biggest improvements. I don't know. So I guess the first thing that kind of comes to mind is really kind of having a unique value proposition for why users should be going to your website rather than to any of the others. And that includes the original source. So if you're an affiliate bookstore, for example, and when people come to buy the book, you send them off to maybe some original publisher somewhere else, then really make sure that what you're providing on your website is significantly better than the original source, so that when we look at this situation and see, well, this is a website that talks about this book, and this is where people go in the end to actually buy the book, we can still say, well, this is actually the much better result for users. And providing that real strong additional value is sometimes really hard to do. And that's not something that you can do by just like creating a small PHP script that aggregates a bunch of reviews or that generates some fake content that makes it look like this text was rewritten. Those kind of things, you really want to provide something really strong of value where anyone that looks at these 2 websites will say, I'm going to recommend your website to all of my friends because your website provides a lot more value to what I'm trying to achieve. So I guess that's one thing. It's hard to come up with 2 others that are kind of similar. In general, one thing I'd recommend doing is not focusing so much on the technical details, but actually thinking about the overall value. So going in there and saying, oh, I'm going to change from HTML4 to HTML5, and that will be my unique selling proposition, nobody's going to notice that. You really need something that people, when they come to your site, that they realize this is really what I want. So kind of taking a step back, not focusing so much on like tweaking scripts to make them look more unique, but really providing something additional of value. Could it be the case that Panda hasn't reached my website yet, and when it does, we'll go through every page and reassign a score to it? Will Panda revisit if we're doing lots of changes or adding new content? In general, a lot of these algorithms kind of run either regularly, in that they keep running over and over again, or that they run every time we crawl and index a new page. So that's something where you wouldn't need to do anything unique on your pages to make sure that the algorithms look at these pages again. I've noticed a business breaking the Google Terms of Service. They use fake numbers in the Google My Business maps, and the address which they list is an empty office with no sign. They do this in multiple Australian cities. They dominate Google Maps. Can I report them? Probably. I don't know specifically how Google Maps, Google My Business handles these things. One thing I would do is go to the Maps help forum and kind of explain the problem that you've run across there and see if they can point you at maybe one of the forms or one of the ways that you could actually report this. If this is something where you see this happening on a larger scale, that's hard to report in one of the standard forms. Sometimes, for example, for the web spam issues, we have something where you enter one URL and you give some context about that. If it's really a bigger thing that you can't fit into a form like that, I maybe look to see if you can find one of the people who's responsible in the forum and send them that directly, for example. So if it's about web spam, for example, that's something you could send to me. If it's about Google My Business, I don't know offhand who would be able to take something like a bigger case like that up and kind of pass that on. But the people in the help forum, they'll generally know who to contact or point people at your thread and say, post the information here, and we'll pass that on to the Googlers responsible. How important are the rankings of Google Maps in relations to local rankings? Improving our local rankings. We have a local page with name, address, phone number, optimized tags, etc., but are struggling to rank. Any tips? I don't have any tips at all, actually, for Google local rankings, because that's kind of treated separately from the search side. So the normal search results, I can help with that. But with regards to like this local pack that we sometimes show with the local search results in general, that's not something where I'd have any insight into that. So I go to the Google My Business help forums and kind of check with the guys there. I know there are also some really well-made blogs, for example, that cover all of these local issues where you can probably read up on that. Mike Blumenthal comes to mind. He's been really active on local. And national business using fake numbers in Google Maps. This is kind of the same as the other ones, where I don't really have any insight into the Google Maps issues. I really go to the Google Maps help forum for that. Why websites with thin content is ranking better? Our website is actually better, but why is this bad one outranking us? Again, that's something where I go to the Webmaster Help Forum and kind of explain what you're seeing and get some advice on both your site and on the situation in general. Sometimes it makes sense to do a web spam report. Sometimes it's just, well, that's the way that site is, and you're better off focusing on your site to improve it rather than trying to worry too much about what they're doing. We recently have problems with website loading speed. We're still trying to figure it out, what causes the delays. If this problem appears 1 to 2 days, will we have problems in Google rankings? No. So we try to differentiate between websites that load somewhat reasonably and websites that load really, really slowly. And that's kind of where we make the cut. And if you're talking about a website that's just loading a little bit slower than usual, or some of the pages are loading a little bit slower than usual, that's not something that we'd really worry about. So probably users will react stronger to an issue like that than we would. We've recently seen changes in search volume provided by the Google Keyword Planner for synonyms, typos, and other kinds of things. Is that a bug or a feature? I don't know. So the Keyword Planner is run by the AdWords team, and you need to check with them to see what kind of changes they made there. So I'd go to the AdWords forum for something like that. Seem to be sending people to a lot of different forums today. I hope they appreciate the traffic. I'd like to ask a person a question. Can you send me a link to do so? I'd post actually in the Webmaster Help Forum for something like that if it's a Webmaster-related question. Another local question. Lots of local questions. So when implementing an alternate media tag on your desktop site to point to m.example.com version, what's the recommended markup to use? 640 pixel would not apply to the latest smartphones and tablets. Is it 100% necessary to have this tag? Actually, one of the things to watch out for here is that even with modern smartphones and tablets, the physical resolution isn't necessarily the resolution that's used for CSS media queries. So that's one thing where probably you're getting thrown off and saying, well, most smartphones have a higher resolution than 640 pixels. Actually, the phone itself will act like it has a lower resolution. So that's one thing to kind of keep in mind there, and maybe to kind of double check the information there with regards to the phones that you use. You'll see this very quickly if you use Chrome and you use inspect element to change the emulation to a smartphone. If you pick one of the types there, you'll see the resolution that it actually reports through CSS. And with regards to is it necessary to have this tag, obviously, these things aren't necessary, but the clearer you can give us the information that this is the desktop version, this is the mobile version, and they belong together, the more likely we'll be able to take that into account. So it's one of those type of SEO things where if you give us consistent information, we'll try to use that consistent information. Whereas if you give us inconsistent information or like partially perfect information, then it might be that our algorithms look at that and say, well, we're not sure what to do here. Maybe we'll do this, or maybe we'll do that. So the clearer you can be about what you want, the more likely we'll be able to take that into account. Who should we consider the new Matt Cutts? I think there's only one Matt Cutts, and nobody can replace him. So I'm sorry, I don't have an answer for this. Our website is very much in detail. We update on a regular basis. We focus on the end user, but there's a website, something else that has thin content and is outranking us. Why does Google rank websites with thin content, which is not updated, so high? This kind of goes back to the forum questions where I tend to send something like this. I think there's another question where you mentioned both of the websites, and I took a quick look at what was happening there, and actually your website is getting significantly more traffic than this other website. So I suspect maybe you're looking at individual queries where you're saying, oh, this website is outranking me for this specific query. But actually, that's just like one out of many queries where things are going one way or another. So that's something where I'd recommend taking a step back and looking at the bigger picture rather than focusing just on individual queries. And another thing to keep in mind, we use over 200 factors for crawling, indexing, and ranking. So it's very possible that some sites are ranking based on one set of signals and another website is ranking on a different set of signals. And it's not that we're comparing things one-to-one and saying, well, this website mentions this word 5 times and this one only 3 times. Therefore, this one will rank higher than that one. We try to look at the overall picture and see which one is the most relevant for these queries for those specific users. A client created a new site about a very specific product. He gives all the information he has about his product, and the competition is very low. He's already ranking in the top 20 for all long-tail queries, but he's not even in the top 100 for the main keyword. Why is that? That's similar to what I mentioned before, is that we use a lot of signals for crawling, indexing, and ranking. And just because he's very good in one part doesn't mean that it's going to be very good in other parts as well. That's similar, for example, if you have one website that's really, really good in France, that doesn't necessarily mean it'll automatically be really, really good in the UK as well, because there's a whole different audience out there. It's a different kind of competition for those different situations. You can't really map like the performance for one specific part of search to a bigger part of search, or even just a generally different part of search. So things will always be different across different queries and types of rankings. We're planning to migrate our old mobile site, single-page application with fragment URLs, to newer platforms. Since fragment URLs are already in Google Index, how should we redirect these URLs to the new, not fragment URLs? So this is kind of tricky, because you can't do a 301 redirect for fragment URLs, because these aren't server requests that actually make it there. But what you can do is use JavaScript redirects. You can use things like rel canonicals on those pages to kind of point us to the preferred versions. Both of those are things that we will pick up and try to use for a change like this. In general, though, this is a much trickier situation than with normal static-looking URLs, where you could set up clean redirects. But since you're moving away from this setup to a cleaner one, I think sometimes you just have to bite the bullet and say, well, the future is going to look really awesome, and in the meantime, we're going to have maybe a time where things are a bit wonky because we can't do clean server-side redirects, and maybe it'll take a bit longer for Google to update the index for the new URLs. We're designing a new mobile site and thinking about using multiple select boxes as a filtering mechanism. Our main concern is how to keep the mobile site crawlable for Googlebot while using multiple select box for navigation. That's something to kind of try to watch out for, I guess. One thing I'd kind of mention here is if this mobile site maps to a desktop site, then sometimes that's less of a problem if we can still crawl the desktop site. And if the desktop site is canonical, then we can try to focus on the desktop site and use the links to the mobile site to figure that part out. On the other hand, if this mobile site is essentially replacing everything that you have, then I would certainly try to figure out a way to make this crawlable so that Google can actually recognize the links between those individual items and take that into account. And depending on the UI and how you're handling that, sometimes that's easier, sometimes that's quite a bit harder. For example, if you're using JavaScript that reacts to certain like interactions that you do with the page and then redirects to a different URL, kind of for the navigation, then what might happen there is that Googlebot doesn't realize that these elements can be interacted with and that there are actually URLs associated with that. And that makes it really hard. But that's something where you kind of, I don't know, it's really hard to figure out how to deal with this appropriately. One of the things I might do there is maybe set up a small test site and see how Google actually kind of goes from the home page to the individual lower level pages, or maybe if Google doesn't go to the lower level pages. You mentioned for larger web spam reports, due to detail and significance, to reach out to you. What would be the appropriate way to do that? Is this the form that you mentioned? So yes, that's the spam report form that you link to. And what you could do is just send me a note on Google+ with the appropriate details, and I'll forward that on to the team here. Since I'm not directly on the web spam team, I have to bring this on to the team and let them try to prioritize that and figure out how to handle this. So I can't guarantee that they'll be able to take your report and then turn it into a manual action and take those sites out of the index. Sometimes they take more granular action, which might mean that they say, well, there are problematic links here, therefore we'll make sure that these problematic links don't pass any PageRank. And that's not something that you might see directly in the search results. Or they might even take these reports and say, well, this is a really good report, this is a really important issue, but we'd like to handle it on a more algorithmic basis so that we can tackle all sites that are doing something similar. So that's something where sometimes there's kind of a gap between what you report to me and what you see immediately afterwards in search. I'm doing a massive structured data markup changes on my pages that may affect rankings in Google search. So in general, structured data on a site doesn't affect the site's rankings. It affects the rich snippets that we would show or that we might not show. So it's not so much that the rankings will jump up and down, but more that maybe we'll show stars or maybe we won't show stars. When are we going to expect Google Search Console redesigned with material design with a handful of new powerful reports that allow more data to be exported? As always, we tend not to pre-announce things, so that's not something where I can say, well, this is happening, this isn't happening. We're going to launch this tomorrow or next week or next year. I do know the team is working on Search Console, and they're not tired of Search Console yet, so they'll probably continue working on adding new reports, tweaking things to make them more actionable, and maybe working on the design as well. When there's two identical pages URL that only distinguish each other with a slash at the end, what will be the best measure to deal with this duplicate content? Set up a redirect, delete the duplicate pages, unindex. So what I would do there is just put a rel canonical on these pages and kind of let it take care of itself that way. So where I redirect or do anything drastic like put no index or manually remove those pages. I just kind of let it settle down naturally. We have a site with more than 70 to 100 images per page. Recently, we added lazy load to speed things up. There will be a problem with indexing the images, or will we get in trouble because of it? So we use image source equals default PNG, and then data original equals the actual image URL. So sometimes this is hard. One of the things to kind of watch out for here is we do render the page to see what's actually shown and to figure out which images are actually shown and how they're shown on the page. So if when you look at things with Fetch as Google using the rendering options, you don't see those images, then probably we're having trouble with the way you're using lazy loading to display those images. On the other hand, if we do show them, then that's something that we could pick up and actually use for image search as well. If you're talking about a page with like 70 to 100 images, and I assume that's like multiple pagefuls, and if you're only lazy loading the top part of the page, then we'll probably miss out on the images that are lower on the page that need to be lazy loaded when someone scrolls through to that part of the page. So that's something maybe worth keeping in mind. If there's a lot of cross-use of the same images across different parts of your site, then maybe that doesn't matter so much. But if these images are only on one page and they're lazy loaded after like scrolling down 3 or 4 times, then that's possible that we'll kind of miss out on those for image search. I submitted my site for a site clinic about 4 weeks ago, was unable to find out if the site was used in the Hangout. I'm guessing you're very busy. That's possible. I'd look into the Webmasters YouTube channel, because that's where all of these videos end up. And if you submitted for the site clinic, I don't know, I think that was maybe 3 or 4 weeks ago, then you'll probably see that there. All those videos do get recorded, so you can watch those later on as well. All right, let me just open it up for questions from you all. What else is on your mind?
John, I've got a quick one. Can I get your opinion on something if I put the link into the chat, please, and just if you could just have a look at that, it's just a link to Google search.
Okay.
So as you'll notice, the phrase, you might have had this before, but I just want to get your opinion. Next day delivery, PPC, it's got the delivery companies, as you'd expect, it's not biased to anything. Yet we have a lot of businesses where they've just got a next day delivery page. So my two questions really are, is that right? I mean, because I know PPC works very different to organic, but they're not related to each other in any way. And my second question would be, why is it so, I suppose, so biased to the fashion industry? It seems like Boohoo, Amazon, those are ones that I can remember. You know, it's got all these sites ranking. It just seems kind of odd. So I was just wondering if you could give me an opinion on that. Is this Google doing a good job of organic, or what?
I don't, to be honest, I don't know what you would be looking for with a query like that.
What if you were looking for a delivery company that delivered next day? So you would search for next day delivery. If you were looking for a particular company that did next day delivery, you'd be searching for Amazon, Boohoo, or whatever. So if you're looking for a specific parcel company, hence the PPC that kind of backs up that argument.
Like a parcel. So you're looking for parcel delivery.
Yeah, next day.
I don't know much about this business, but this kind of search phrase seems really, really vague to me. It seems like something where you're almost like searching for terms of service, and you get random terms of service from websites. Like I imagine these are all companies that do offer next day delivery for the actual product that they're selling. So it's like to some extent you could say, well, it's kind of next day delivery. But I think the main problem there is really that the query is so vague that we don't really know what people are actually looking for something like that. If it were something like parcel next day delivery or something more along the lines, I'm really looking for some service to take a box that I have and deliver that tomorrow, then that would be a bit different. But at least from my point of view, this seems really like a vague query where the results are almost, it's like, we don't know what you're looking for. Here's some things that match these terms.
So I suppose the sites that are showing, i.e., misguided, Boohoo, I suppose there's no real rhyme or reason as to why they're ranking. They just seem to be the strongest sites, but there's no real, just because it strikes me as odd that I'd expect more randomness, more random businesses, more random sites. Seems very focused, and I just wondered, is there a bias playing there somewhere? I'm not sure. But
I don't know. I think this is really just, it kind of mixes a bunch of the signals that we have, and we don't really know what we should be showing there. So it's kind of random. I don't know what that order would specifically point at. I'm guessing it's just we don't really know what to show.
Right, okay, I'll leave that. It was just because I was asked and I couldn't really explain why we had two different things shown in PPC and SEO, which were relevant to each other at all, so thought I'd ask you. Okay.
Are there any companies that would describe themselves as next day delivery without putting another descriptive word in there?
I imagine they probably would. I mean,
what do you do next day delivery?
For me, if I said that, okay, this particular phrase in PPC seems to convert very well, if I knew that information that is converting very well, it would suggest that the parcel companies that are being shown in PPC are relevant for that search term, the user intent, because they're converting quite well. So that's what I would say on that. So again,
I suspect they're spending a lot of money on PPC for no good reason. I'd go the other way. But
yeah.
Well, I was thinking if it's just on broad match. So if it's on broad match, anything that says delivery in or next day or something like that, and then it's just appearing there, and quite rightly say, probably costing quite a lot. But yeah, I thought I'd just throw that out there anyway, just to what your thought. Because I have no idea.
Different, yeah.
I'll just take it as too generic that Google can't necessarily decipher what the user intent is. Therefore,
I think, yeah, I think that's really the case there.
I'll take that. Thank you.
All right. Okay, so let's take a break here. I'm sure there are lots more questions that we can focus on, but I need to run off. So if there's anything more on your mind, feel free to add them to the next Hangouts or jump by one of the forums that I mentioned as well. Thank you, everyone, for joining, and hope I'll see you again in one of the future Hangouts. Bye.
Thank you. Bye.